What's going on, Packers Nation? Happy Sunday. Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. This is the last video that I am recording before going on vacation. I have a full 8 days of videos for you guys while I am out with a ton of tremendous guests. Just want to take a quick moment to say thank you to all of those guests for coming on and preparing those videos in advance with me. I had a ton of fun just catching up with some people that I haven't had the opportunity to catch up with from just a friendship point of view, but a Packers point of view as well. I learned something and took something away from every one of those conversations. So I hope you guys enjoy the heck out of it. I guess 7 guests. And then I did the AI video as well, predicting the Packers 2025 season, which was a ton of fun to do. So you guys have stuff waiting for you. If you're a Pack a Day member, those videos are already out there and ready and waiting for you. If you want to be more patient, of course, you can wait so you have something daily as well. But thank you all for the support to just, again, be able to do this and have the opportunity to go on vacation. I hope all of you guys are having a tremendous weekend. And as always, thank you so much for being here. And I will see you guys here again before you know it. And when we get back, should be a Justice Mosqueda episode, and he'll be able to catch me up on anything that I might have missed over the course of the next week. So this is actually, today's episode is an idea that I had that just kind of came to me the other day. My initial plan, yesterday's episode, was the most overrated and underrated Packers. In the past, I separated those out into 2 different episodes, one being the most overrated players, the other being the most underrated. I could have done that again and separated that into 2 different episodes and kind of just expanded the content or whatever, right? But I decided to put that into one episode, and I wanted to get to this one. And I'll be totally honest, I didn't know what the results of this were going to be. And the title of today's episode, my guess, is something to the extent of, which Packers opponents kicked the Packers' ass in 2024. And I wanted to take a look at this because I had this idea in my mind of, I want to know who really took it to Green Bay this past year. Because I'm wondering, like, if it was a defensive tackle, like a nose tackle, right? Maybe Josh Myers being gone would be something that would be able to help that moving forward. Maybe moving Elton into center and getting Aaron Banks in there would be something that would mitigate those huge losses against a big-time defensive tackle. Maybe if it was a wide receiver that got the best of Eric Stokes, that would be something that could potentially be upgraded by Nate Hobbs being in Green Bay, playing Carrington Valentine more, things like that. So I kind of wanted to know, what did Green Bay struggle with? I also wanted to know, were there trends? Was it a slot wide receiver that was tearing them apart every time? Was it power running back, speed running back? Was it offensive lines that played with more physicality? What was it that Green Bay really struggled with? And again, are they better set up to deal with those type of opponents in 2025? So that was my impetus of this entire sort of episode, was to kind of dig into it and figure out, who did Green Bay struggle with and why? And is it fixable? And did they fix it this offseason to a point where maybe these players will not tear up Green Bay as much? So the first thing I did is I went and I looked at all of the games from 2024, and I went on PFF site and went and looked to see who had the most dominant PFF scores against Green Bay. And I was expecting, you have 17 regular season games and an 18th game with the wild card game. I'm expecting like multiple grades in the 90s throughout the course of the season. Because remember, you're on offense and on defense. There's, 15, 16 guys that play in every single game on both sides of the ball. And you're 18 games in. So I'm expecting multiple 90 level grades against Green Bay, or at least a handful of like high 80s, etc. There were really only 5 high PFF grades for players that actually played enough snaps, not like they played 8 snaps and had a good grade or something like that. There were actually 5 players that had really high PFF grades against Green Bay this past year. The first one was in week 1. Reed Blankenship, the safety, remember he had that big interception on that Luke Musgrave play, had an 89.7 PFF grade on 67 snaps. Number 2, was in week 5, was Kobe Turner, the defensive tackle for the Rams, had a 90.2 PFF grade on 48 snaps. In week 8, Brian Thomas Jr., even this one's kind of cheating a little bit because he only played 29 snaps in that game, but he had an 88.1 grade against Green Bay, again, the Jacksonville wide receiver. Week 9, Kirby Joseph, the safety for the Lions, 87.7 PFF grade on 65 snaps. Remember, he had that big pick six against Jordan Love in that game. And then in week 12, George Kittle, a 90.7 grade on 41 snaps. So George Kittle actually had the highest grade against Green Bay this past year in a game that the Packers blew out the 49ers basically in that game, followed by Kobe Turner in that Rams game, followed by Reed Blankenship, Brian Thomas Jr., and Kirby Joseph. Those were the five. There were a couple other ones in like the 85s, 84s, 83s, low 80s. Even that, like there weren't a ton in the 80s period, much less high 80s or anything in like, there's nothing in the high 90s, just a couple low 90s with Kobe Turner and George Kittle. My guess is when I was going to start reading off those names, you did not have Reed Blankenship, Kobe Turner, Brian Thomas Jr., Kirby Joseph, and George Kittle on your bingo card for the players that quote unquote tore apart Green Bay this past year. So I thought, well, that's one way of looking at it is by PFF score. But another way is just kind of looking through the box scores and seeing maybe they didn't have the greatest PFF grade, but if somebody had like, 12 catches for 182 yards and 3 touchdowns, screw the PFF grade to some extent. They had a big game against Green Bay. So I went through and looked at which players had big games against Green Bay on the box score. You had week 1, 3 players stood out immediately. So I'm like, all right, here we go. Saquon Barkley, week 1, 24 carries, 109 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 receptions, 23 yards, and another touchdown. So he had 132 yards and 3 touchdowns on only 26 touches. So that's a pretty darn good game. He tore up Green Bay pretty well, had that wheel route for a touchdown in the passing game. He was very good in that game. AJ Brown in that game. Remember, he torched Jair pretty well. 5 catches, 119 yards, and a touchdown for AJ Brown in that game. And Zach Bond had 15 tackles and 2 sacks in that game. So 3 players, Saquon Barkley, AJ Brown, and Zach Bond. In week 3, Kenneth Murray, the linebacker for the Titans, had 8 tackles, 2 sacks, and a tackle for loss. So that's a pretty good game overall, especially for an off-ball linebacker. Anytime you're getting 2 sacks as an off-ball linebacker, it's a pretty impressive game. We talked about Kobe Turner. In week 5, in that performance, he had 6 tackles, 2 sacks, and a pass defense, and he had a bunch of run stops in the run game as well, which is why his PFF grade was so high. Of course, the 2 sacks helped as well. Trey McBride in week 6. This isn't one that's going to like completely catch your eye. You have to kind of go back and watch the tape a little bit on this one. He had 8 catches for 96 yards, no touchdowns, but he was a beast in that game. He only had 8 targets and he caught all 8 of them for 96 yards. So he gave Green Bay a ton of problems on that particular day. Joe Mixon in the Texans game, 25 carries, 115 yards, 2 touchdowns, also had 2 catches for 9 yards. It's a pretty good day. Nothing like spectacular, no like 180-yard day or something like that, but still 124 yards on 27 touches and 2 touchdowns. Tua Tagovailoa in week 13 actually had a better overall day than I remembered. Green Bay was never really at risk in that game, so there's maybe a little bit of empty calories here, but he was still 37 of 46 for 365 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. And to go along with it, if you remember, Jonnu Smith had a huge game, 10 catches, 113 yards, and were really attacking the middle of the field all day long with their tight ends and wide receivers in that game. But Green Bay won that game. Week 17, Blake Cashman for Minnesota, 11 tackles, 1.5 sacks, a tackle for loss, 2 quarterback hits. He was all over the place in that particular game. And then in the wild card game, maybe a name that you're not going to expect me to bring up here, Nolan Smith had 8 tackles and 2 sacks in that game, was really good against the run, and was a big-time pass rusher. He had a fantastic game in that wild card game against the Packers, of course, where Green Bay was eliminated and the Philadelphia Eagles won. That's not to say there weren't other impressive players. Like Justin Jefferson had 2 good games against Green Bay, but he never went over 100 yards. And we could go on and on. There were plenty of players that had good performances. Devontae Smith had 2 good performances against Green Bay, but nothing that really reached that, like, they destroyed the Packers or anything like that. Nothing that reached that level. So there were definitely others, again, that played well, but nothing that stood out at an epic level, right? That somebody that you just looked at and be like, wow, they just completely tore through Green Bay. Even this list here, like Saquon Barkley, it was 132 yards. For Saquon, that can sometimes be pedestrian. AJ Brown, 119 yards and a touchdown. All right, like that's an AJ Brown sort of game. Kenneth Murray, a couple sacks. Kobe Turner, a couple sacks. Trey McBride was still under 100 yards. Joe Mixon, 124 yards, but on 27 touches, it's not like something super crazy. Tua Tagovailoa, again, some empty calories in that one. Jonnu Smith, 10 for 113, impressive day, but no touchdowns. Blake Cashman, a solid day, 1.5 sacks, tackle for loss, etc. Nolan Smith, a couple sacks, but we're not talking about anyone here that had 180 yards receiving. We're not talking about anyone that had 180 yards rushing. We're not talking about anyone that had like 3 interceptions or 4 sacks or anything like that. Green Bay, for the most part here, did a really great job in not letting any one player in any one game just continue to beat them over and over again, whether that be on the offensive side of the ball or on the defensive side of the ball. And what I really ended up taking away from this exercise is that this, I think, was a little bit of a hidden superpower is aggressive, but this was like a hidden strength of the Green Bay Packers in 2024. I was really expecting some more big time box scores and just some big PFF grades and players that really kind of picked apart Green Bay at times, whether that be at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, offensive line, tight end, what defensively, whatever it might be. You know, usually it's your stars that are making plays and, you know, your stars that you have to stop on the opposing side if you really want to be successful. And I thought for the most part, as you went through this exercise and looked at the PFF grades and only had 5 players that had really high grades and a box score that wasn't like unbelievably impressive for any one player, I think for the most part, Green Bay actually did a pretty darn good job in taking away the big weapons, not letting Justin Jefferson go for 160 yards, not letting, you know, some of these big time performers have those big time games and making the other players on the team beat you. Now, in games against Minnesota, Philly, Detroit, those are the big 3. They are like, okay, yeah, that's fine. We have a lot of different options. Jahmyr Gibbs played well every time. Amon-Ra St. Brown played well. Jamison Williams played well. It wasn't like Green Bay was just shut down in all these games or things like that. Just that other teams were able to spread the ball around and had multiple options that they could throw to or run the ball with or defend with in any of those games. So it's, again, not like Green Bay was perfect. But I will say, I do think it's worth noting that Matt LaFleur and Jeff Hafley, respectively, were well aware of the players that they knew could not beat them. And if guys like Jalen Carter in the, you know, wild card game, or Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, you know, we can go on and on. If you let those players, Tyreek Hill, if you let those players take over a game, you're probably going to lose. It's probably going to be either an uphill battle or just a losing cause for you if you let those guys get going. I think it's noteworthy that for the most part, the Packers made sure that the big time performers, that they were going to get theirs. You're not going to shut them down entirely. Tyreek Hill's still going to get good yardage, and I think he had a touchdown in that game as well. Justin Jefferson still had 2 good games against Green Bay. Devontae Smith still had 2 good games against Green Bay. It's not saying that they were shut down by any stretch of the imagination on a lot of these players, but they didn't let the stars consistently beat them. And that in and of itself is easier said than done. It's not a simple thing to make it so that those big time players do not beat you on any given Sunday. So I actually think Green Bay, as I went through this, did a tremendous job of taking away a lot of the superstars on both offense and defense and making the secondary and tertiary players try to beat them. And again, sometimes they were able to, especially against those really good teams. And then I kind of looked at it from a 2025 standpoint. What are they up against this year? And one of the things that was pretty noteworthy is I think they have a lot tougher matchups and some more big time players that they're going to go against in 2025, at least more so than they did in 2024. In week 1, we know that Detroit Lions team, Aiden Hutchinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Penei Sewell, Jamar Gibbs, Kirby Joseph, Brian Branch, some big time players in that week 1 game against Detroit. In week 2, you've got Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin. Week 3, Myles Garrett. Week 4, CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons. Week 6, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, Trey Hendrickson. Week 7, Trey McBride and Kyler Murray again. Week 8, DK Metcalf, Aaron Rodgers, if you want to put him in that category. TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, and Alex Highsmith, that great pass rushing trio. Ted McMillan, I guess, for the Carolina Panthers. They've got other good players as well, but very interested to see what he can do this upcoming year. Of course, the Philadelphia Eagles in week 10, Jordan Mailata, A.J. Brown, Lane Johnson, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, Zach Bond, Cooper DeJean, Jalen Carter. We could probably go on from there, but a very talented football team. You're going to have a lot of stars that you got to try to stop in that game. In week 11, for the New York Giants, that big time pass rush now with Dexter Lawrence, Abdul Carter, and Brian Burns. And then, of course, Malik Neighbors at wide receiver. Justin Jefferson and the Vikings in week 12 to go along with Jordan Addison, Aaron Jones, TJ Hawkinson, Jonathan Grenard, and Andrew Van Ginkel. We already talked about the Lions, but you play them again in week 13. DJ Moore, Jalen Johnson for the Bears in week 14. Quinn Miners, Cortland Sutton, Zach Allen, just to name a few for the Broncos in week 15. Bears again in week 16. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Kyle Hamilton, Namadi Madabike, Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers in week 17 against the Ravens, Jair Alexander as well. And then week 18, Minnesota Vikings again with Addison Jefferson, etc. There are a lot of big-time players and a lot of big-time playmakers that the Packers are going to be facing week in and week out this year. And I think it's worth noting that I think it's a tougher, and we just know it's a tougher schedule. At least it looks like it on paper. You never know for sure until you play the games, but it certainly looks like a tougher schedule on paper in 2025. But I also think it's important that this Packers team rises to that level. And when Brian Gutekunst talks about urgency, and we talk about players needing to step up, and some of these young players going from, good players to great players, or great players to all pro players, this is why. You've got to fight firepower with firepower in the NFL. You look at Green Bay. If we were putting this together for Green Bay, who would you put on that list? As we just kind of went through and said, Josh Jacobs, Xavier McKinney, Edgerrin Cooper, Zach Tom. Is that kind of the group that is Jordan Love? That's certainly in that conversation as well. But we're going to learn a lot more about that this upcoming season. Green Bay's got the ability in totality to stick with any team. But if they want to beat the best of the best, they want to consistently beat the best of the best, they want to go out and have a huge season with a big time winning record, it's going to be important that they're able to fight fire with fire, have their players step up and be at the level that some of these players that we just talked about that are at, that they're going to have to face this upcoming year. If the other team just has better playmakers than you, it's a very, very steep climb to get to that level and go out and win that game. Not to say you can't. Turnovers can always play a factor. Home field advantage can always play a factor. Ball just bounces your way in a special occasion, or, you have a bad call go against you. Things can even out in a hurry, but the team with more playmakers, more talent, they're more often than not going to be the team that wins the game. And for Green Bay, you look at some of these matchups and you see some of the players that they're going to be playing against, and you understand pretty quick that guys like Edgerrin Cooper needs to get to that next level. Jordan Love needs to get to that next level. The wide receivers, Tucker Kraft, Luke Musser, we can go on. You know the names. Go back and listen to the X Factors episode from a couple days ago. It's going to be a big season for Green Bay. I think they're going to face a bunch of really challenging teams and some of the best players in the NFL, again, that they're going to have to go against and figure out a way to mitigate. What I took away from this is that they did have, I think, a little bit of maybe even more than a little bit of an easier schedule in 2024 than they have this upcoming year. I do think that challenge is going to raise the bar for the Packers this upcoming season. But the big thing is that I do think Jeff Hafley and Matt LaFleur did a phenomenal job, and of course, give the players credit as well, for taking the big time all pro caliber players and really, for the most part, making it so that those players did not beat you. Again, you look at some of the players who graded really well, you can usually get by if a Reed Blankenship has a good game, or a Kobe Turner, Brian Thomas Jr., maybe not so much, but in that game, they got away with it. Kirby Joseph, George Kittle, those are the players that we talk about next year again that were really good against Green Bay. You're probably in a pretty good spot. You're probably in a winning record situation again. But if all of a sudden we start seeing, in week 17, Lamar Jackson had a huge grade, and Justin Jefferson tore up the Packers this year, Myles Garrett couldn't be stopped for the Browns, that Giants pass rush just completely nuked the Packers offense line, we can't be looking at it and being like, look at all the 90 grades that the Packers gave up this upcoming, or this past season, as we look back at it in the future. That's a weird way of saying that, but you get what I'm saying. I think that's what, again, makes this season really intriguing for the Packers, is which of their young players are stepping up to, again, have the ability to be in the conversation when the Giants are looking at this and saying, who do we have to stop for Green Bay? It's more than just Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs, or maybe, again, you're putting Zach Tom or Edgerrin Cooper in that category, Jordan Love, etc. But again, those guys have to get to that level to prove that they're on the trajectory that we think they're on, to be those hopefully unstoppable players that other teams have to deal with. Can they get to that point? Only time is going to tell. I could not be more excited for the season. I think the schedule is very difficult. I think it's going to present a ton of challenges. I think we're going to see some of the best players in the league take the field against Green Bay. And if Green Bay can once again make it so that those true stars of the league are not the ones that are beating them, they're going to be in a really great position to compete and hopefully win week in and week out. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. Always appreciate it. As mentioned, I will see you guys in about a week and a half. Enjoy all the extra, well, I guess not extra content, but the daily content that we've already got out there for you with a ton of amazing special guests. I'll see you guys soon. Shout out to our All Pro and Hall of Fame members, Most Hated Minnesotan, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Brandon Paletta, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, Dave McCluskey, Donald Decker, Alex Wong, Peter Rataka, Jay Zimmerman, B Brown, Puerto Rican Packer, Dan Gessford, Dylan Pat Scott, SoCal Pack, Chris Rager, Izzy Roberts, Ian Ewing, Jake Koner, Carlo Delgado, Willie Winklestinkle, Jen Wright, The Gable Storm, Matt Geiger, Pack Attack Cast, and Chris Weish. See you guys soon, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.